Now, in this weather, it's more important than ever to put out food and fresh water for the wild birds in your garden.
And by making a note of which feathered friends come into our gardens in the winter, we can learn much more about the health of the bird population as a whole. Our environment correspondent, David Gregory, reports.
In this garden near Lichfield, all sorts of birds are taking advantage of the buffet on offer.
It can get very expensive. I put out an awful lot of food of all different sorts, but the most important thing is if you're going to start, you must keep going. The birds here rely on the food I put out, so I'm filling up these feeders in this weather sometimes twice a day.
But of course you don't have to put out bird food you buy from a shop.
There's plenty of things you can put out that you might have in your kitchen. I put out crumbled granary bread, oats, and also lard, suet, things like that that give the birds plenty of high energy foods.
And Kate records almost every visitor on camera, revealing just how many bird species rely on the food we put out in our gardens.
Now, birds also need a source of water, of course, not just to drink, but actually to wash in as well. They need to keep their feathers in tip-top condition so they can stay nice and warm.
Kate loves all wildlife, even this family of rats, but if you prefer feathered rather than furry visitors...
The secret is to try and keep the bird food in the feeders and put trays so that you minimise the amount of wastage that's going on the floor, and that will help keep down things like that.
As well as being a beautiful display, by making a note of the birds visiting our gardens, we can help scientists and conservationists learn much more about how our wild birds are coping.
Oh, what fabulous pictures. Well, David's outside right now. Do you feed the birds in your garden, David?
Yeah, here in Birmingham city centre, I've only got a small balcony outside my flat, but if you put out food regularly, you encourage all sorts of birds, so sparrows and blackbirds, of course, but also dunnocks and even wagtails. So regularly putting out food, you'll attract lots of birds to even the smallest spaces. And of course, it's the birds you attract that conservationists and scientists are really interested in knowing about, because that'll tell us about the health of the bird population, how they're coping with things like this winter. So this weekend is the RSPB's Big Garden Birdwatch. The RSPB wants us to get out and see what's in our garden. And also the University of Birmingham are doing research on what we feed birds and when we feed them. And all of this will help us learn more about how our wild birds are doing.
David, you say by putting the food out you can attract them, but can feeding birds actually change their behaviour?
Well, that's a very interesting question, Mary. This is a black cap. Now, this is a bird that traditionally migrates south to North Africa at this time of year, but increasingly they're hanging around, and they're hanging around our bird tables because there's so much food. And the British Trust for Ornithology wants us to see how many there are in our garden, and that'll help them learn more about whether our behaviour is actually changing the behaviour of these birds. All the details about how you can help with these kind of surveys are on our Facebook page and, of course, on my blog at bbc.co.uk/David Gregory.